The shelter was unusually quiet that afternoon, the kind of quiet that made every small sound feel important. Dust floated through the warm light spilling from the tall windows. Somewhere down the hall, a radio hummed an old melody barely loud enough to recognize. Emily sat at the front desk, flipping through paperwork, half listening to the soft shuffle of paws and occasional kennel rattles behind her. Then she heard it. Not barking, not whining, just silence where there shouldn't have been. She looked up and saw Max, the quiet, older shepherd mix who barely interacted with anyone, sitting perfectly still beside the old piano in the corner of the community room. His ears were forward, his body tense, his eyes locked on the keys like he was waiting for something, or someone. "Hey buddy," Emily called gently. Max didn't move. When she stepped closer, he let out a low, trembling whine. Not scared, not aggressive. Urgent. Almost pleading. When she tried to guide him away, he planted his paws, refusing to move, his body shaking. Emily's chest tightened. Dogs didn't act like this for no reason. The air suddenly felt heavier. The piano room smelled faintly like old wood and dust, and something else she couldn't place. Max pressed closer to the piano bench, staring underneath it, then back at her, like he was begging her to understand. Emily knelt slowly, heart starting to race. Because whatever Max was sensing wasn't normal. Before we continue, remember to like, share and subscribe for more heart-touching dog stories. And tell me, where are you watching from? The afternoon light stretched long across the shelter floor. Dust drifted slowly through the golden beams, floating, settling, rising again each time a kennel door closed somewhere down the hall. It smelled like disinfectant, old blankets, dog shampoo, and underneath it all something warm, something familiar. The quiet scent of animals who had waited too long for someone to come back for them. Emily shifted in her chair at the front desk, rubbing her eyes for a second before going back to the intake form stacked beside her keyboard. The hum of the air conditioner mixed with the low murmur of a radio playing somewhere in the staff room. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. The kind that made long shifts feel predictable. Comfortable. She glanced at the clock. 2:17 p.m. Slow day. She stood, stretching her back, then grabbed a stainless steel water bowl from the counter. "All right, crew," she said softly to no one in particular, already walking toward the kennels. "Let's do refills." The hallway greeted her with familiar noises, tails thumping against metal doors, soft panting, the occasional hopeful bark when dogs recognized footsteps. Routine. Predictable. Grounding. Halfway down the row, she paused at kennel 14. Max lifted his head slowly from his paws. The older shepherd mix had arrived 3 weeks ago, and in all that time he had barely made a sound. No barking, no jumping, no pacing like the others. Just watching. Always watching. "Hey, handsome," Emily said quietly, crouching near the gate. Max stood, joints stiff but steady. His tail moved once. Then again. Slow. Careful. Polite. He stepped forward and pressed his nose gently through the bars. Emily smiled. "Yeah, I know. You're patient. Too patient." She opened the kennel and stepped inside, moving slowly so he wouldn't feel crowded. Max lowered his head slightly, not fearful, not submissive, just cautious. His ears tilted forward, tracking every movement she made. She filled his water bowl. Max didn't rush to drink. Instead, he watched her, studied her face, then leaned forward just enough for his shoulder to brush her knee. Emily exhaled softly. Good boy. For a moment, everything felt simple. Then, from somewhere down the hall, a metal door clicked shut. Max's ears snapped upright. His body froze. Not startled. Not scared. Listening. Emily turned, expecting barking or staff voices, or the delivery guy dropping food bags again. Nothing followed. Just silence. Max stepped backward slowly, then turned, and walked out of the kennel. "Hey, Max." He didn't look back. He moved down the hallway at a steady pace. Not rushing, not wandering, like he knew exactly where he was going. Emily stood quickly. "Max, buddy, hold on." She followed him past the grooming room, past the supply closet, toward the older wing of the shelter, the part they mostly used for community events now. The air felt different there. Still. Dustier. The radio noise faded. Max slowed near the open doorway to the community room, then stopped. Saturday. Perfectly still. Emily stepped into the doorway beside him and followed his gaze. The old upright piano sat against the far wall, sunlight spilling across its scratched wooden surface. A faded bench rested in front of it, one leg slightly shorter than the others, making it tilt. It hadn't been used in months, maybe longer. "Max," she whispered. He didn't move. His ears stayed forward. His eyes locked on the piano keys. Emily stepped closer to him, crouching slightly. "You like music, huh?" His tail didn't move. Instead, a small sound escaped him, a low trembling whine. Emily's chest tightened. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pain. It sounded like longing. She reached gently for his collar. "Come on, buddy. Let's head back." Max stood. For a second she thought he'd follow. Then he planted his paws. Firm. Grounded. Refusing. "Max." She tugged lightly. Nothing. His body started to shake, just slightly, like he was holding himself still on purpose. Then he stepped closer to the piano bench. Another whine. Higher this time. Urgent. Emily swallowed. Okay. She knelt beside him, heart beating a little faster now. "Talk to me, buddy. What is it?" Max leaned forward slowly, sniffed the air, then lowered his head, staring underneath the bench, then back at her, then back under the bench, like he was trying to show her, like he needed her to see something. The room suddenly felt heavier, the air thick with old wood dust, and something faint, something metallic. Emily shifted closer to the bench. Max pressed against her leg, not pushing her away, holding her there, keeping her close. She reached forward slowly, heart pounding now, fingers brushing the floor beneath the piano. Nothing. Just dust. Cobweb threads. But Max whined again. Sharper. More desperate. Emily lay down on her side, peering deeper into the shadow beneath the piano. Her breath caught. There was something there. Not moving. Not clear enough to see. Just something dark against the wall. She pushed herself up slowly, pulse racing. Max stood instantly, waiting, watching her face. Emily reached for her radio clipped to her belt, then hesitated. Because suddenly, the shelter didn't feel normal anymore. The quiet didn't feel peaceful. Felt like waiting, like holding breath. Max pressed closer to the piano bench again, trembling now, eyes fixed beneath it. Emily swallowed hard. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. I see it. I see it." She stood slowly, heart pounding in her ears. And for the first time since Max arrived at the shelter, she realized this wasn't random. This wasn't anxiety. This wasn't habit. This was instinct. And whatever Max was sensing was not ordinary. Emily reached for the radio, paused, then knelt beside him again, resting one hand gently against his shoulder. His shaking slowed, just a little. "Stay with me," she whispered. Max exhaled softly, but his eyes never left the darkness beneath the piano. And Emily knew something was about to change. Something important. Something they weren't prepared for. She stood slowly, stepping toward the staff hallway, the radio trembling slightly in her hand. Behind her, Max let out one long low aching whine, and the sound echoed through the quiet shelter, like a warning, or maybe a memory, or maybe a plea. Emily pressed the radio button. "Hey, can someone come to the community room?" Static. Then, "Yeah, what's up?" Emily swallowed, kept staring at the piano, at Max, at the shadows underneath the bench. "I think," she said slowly, "I think Max found something." And in the heavy waiting quiet of that dusty piano room, Max didn't move, didn't blink, didn't look away, like he already knew. Whatever was coming next would change everything. The next morning arrived wrapped in pale winter light. Thin clouds softened the sun, turning the shelter windows into sheets of dull silver. Outside, the parking lot still held patches of frost where shadows hadn't moved yet. Inside, everything smelled like fresh coffee, laundry detergent, and the faint, comforting warmth of heat vents pushing against the cold air. Emily stepped through the staff entrance, shrugging off her coat, still thinking about yesterday. About the piano. About the shape she thought she saw beneath it. About Max's trembling. She hadn't slept well. Not because she was scared, because she was unsettled. She walked toward the kennel wing, expecting the normal morning chorus of barking and movement. Instead, she heard something different. Silence. Not total silence. Just quieter than usual. Like the dogs were waiting for something. Or someone. She moved faster. "Morning, guys," she called softly as she entered the kennel hallway. Tails wagged. A few soft barks answered her. Routine. Normal. Grounding. She reached kennel 14. Empty. Her stomach dropped. Max. She turned. And before her brain fully caught up, she already knew where he would be. She walked quickly down the hallway, past grooming, past storage, toward the community room. The door stood half open. Sunlight stretched across the floor. And there he was. Max sat beside the piano, exactly where he had been yesterday. Same posture. Same stillness. Same fixed stare toward the bench. Emily exhaled slowly, stepping closer. "Hey," she whispered. Max's ears twitched at her voice. His tail tapped once against the floor. But he didn't stand. Didn't turn. Didn't break his focus. Emily crouched beside him, following his gaze again. The piano looked normal. Old. Scratched. Dusty along the back edges. But Max's body said otherwise. His shoulders stayed tight. His breathing shallow. His nose lifted slightly, pulling in scent, processing, searching. "You've been here all morning, haven't you?" Behind her, footsteps approached. "Yeah," came Jordan's voice from the doorway. "Found him here before opening." Emily looked back. "Did he eat?" "Barely." Took the bowl back twice. Emily nodded slowly. Max let out a small sound, not a whine this time. More like a quiet hum of concern. Jordan crossed his arms. "You think he hears something? Like mice?" "Maybe," Emily said. But her voice carried doubt. Because Max wasn't hunting. He wasn't excited. He was waiting. And dogs didn't wait like that for prey. Emily reached forward slowly, brushing dust from the piano leg. Max immediately shifted closer. Alert. Protective. But not aggressive. Just present. Just involved. "It's okay," she murmured. "I'm just looking." Max's eyes flicked between her hand and the space beneath the bench. Again. And again. Like he was tracking both. Jordan stepped closer. "You want me to move it? We can check under." Max stood instantly. Tail stiff. Ears forward. Body tense. Emily held up a hand. "Wait." Jordan froze. Max stepped closer to Emily's side, pressing lightly into her leg. Grounding himself. Or grounding her. Emily swallowed. "Not yet," she said quietly. Jordan nodded slowly. "Okay." They stood there for a moment. Just breathing. Just listening. The heater clicked on somewhere down the hall. Air moved softly through vents. The piano wood creaked faintly as the building settled. Max's ears twitched at every sound. Filtering. Sorting. Listening for something else. Emily sat slowly on the floor beside him. "You can tell me," she whispered. Max leaned slightly toward her. Then back toward the bench. Repeat. Like a slow rhythm. Emily stayed there nearly 20 minutes. Just watching him. Just feeling the weight of the quiet room. Eventually, Jordan cleared his throat softly. "We should open." Emily nodded but didn't stand right away. Finally, she touched Max's shoulder gently. "Come on. Breakfast round 2. Max hesitated. Then stood. But as they walked toward the door, he kept looking back. Step. Look back. Step. Look back. Like he was memorizing the room. or making sure it was still there, or promising something. By afternoon, it had become a pattern. Whenever Max was out of his kennel, he went to the piano. Every time. No wandering. No exploring. No interest in toys or visitors. Just the piano. Visitors asked about him. Why does that dog just sit there? Emily would smile politely. He likes quiet spaces. But inside, she felt the question growing. By day 3, he started whining when separated from the room. Not loud. Not constant. Just soft rhythmic distress sounds. At night, staff reported he paced his kennel if the community room door was closed. By day 4, he refused treats if they were given outside that room. Emily sat beside him that evening, watching golden sunset light stretch across the piano keys. "You're trying to tell us something," she whispered. Max blinked slowly, then lowered his head onto his paws, still facing the bench. Emily rested her hand against his back, felt his breathing, slow, but tight, like he was holding tension inside. "You're not scared," she said quietly. "You're worried." Max's ear flicked toward her voice. The smallest acknowledgement. Emily swallowed, because suddenly, she felt it too. That subtle weight in the room. That quiet sense of waiting. The faint metallic scent again. Barely there, but real. She leaned forward slightly, peering beneath the bench again. Still shadows. Still dust. Still something she couldn't fully see. But now, she was sure. This wasn't random behavior. This wasn't adjustment stress. This was purpose. Pure instinct. The sun dipped lower. The piano keys darkened in shadow. Max shifted slightly closer to the bench, then stopped moving completely, like he was standing guard. Emily exhaled slowly. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. We're going to figure this out." Max's tail moved once. Slow. Certain. Outside wind brushed against the shelter walls. Inside, the piano room held its quiet secret, and Max kept watch, like he was protecting something, or waiting for someone, or listening for something no human ear could hear. Emily stayed beside him until closing time, until the last visitor left, until the hallway lights dimmed. When she finally stood to leave, Max followed, but paused in the doorway, looked back at the piano one more time. Long, still, unmoving, then turned, and walked beside her into the hallway. But Emily knew. Tomorrow morning, he would be back. Waiting, watching, listening. For the reason he refused to leave. For the reason his instincts wouldn't let go. And somewhere deep in her chest, Emily felt it growing too. That quiet certainty. That something beneath that piano was still not finished with them. The rain started just before sunrise. Soft at first, barely louder than breathing. By mid-morning it tapped steadily against the shelter windows. A quiet, endless rhythm that made the whole building feel smaller. More enclosed. More reflective. Emily stood in the staff kitchen, watching water slide down the glass while the coffee machine hummed. Behind her, the morning shift moved through routine motions. Leashes clipped. Bowls filled. Laundry loaded. Normal sounds. Normal morning. But inside her chest, nothing felt normal. "Earth to Emily," Jordan said gently, nudging a mug toward her. She blinked. "Sorry. Thanks. You're still thinking about piano guard?" She gave a small smile. "Please don't call him that." Jordan shrugged. "It's accurate." Emily wrapped her hands around the warm mug, letting the heat ground her. "He was there again this morning," she said quietly. Jordan nodded. "Yeah. Sat down before I even unlocked the office." Emily stared into her coffee. "Did you see anything under it?" he asked. She shook her head slowly. "Just shadows." Jordan leaned back against the counter. "Could be habit forming. Dogs do that. Find one safe spot, lock onto it." Emily nodded, because logically, that made sense. Trauma dogs often formed attachments to objects or places. Predictable spaces. Sound anchors. Memory triggers. She knew this. She had studied this. She had lived this with dozens of shelter dogs over the years. And yet, Max didn't act like a dog clinging to safety. He acted like a dog waiting for something to happen, or trying to stop something from happening. The radio crackled softly on the counter. Routine chatter. Supply orders. Adoption appointment confirmations. Life moving forward. Morning meeting in 5, called Sandra from the hallway. Emily nodded and followed the others toward the conference table. Rain sounds filled the pauses between voices. Sandra flipped open her tablet. All right. Quick notes. Intake numbers down good. Medical clearance for transport group tomorrow. And Max. Emily straightened slightly. Sandra continued, calm and practical. We're noting increasing fixation behavior. Piano room attachment. Mild food refusal outside preferred space. She glanced at Emily. Thoughts? Emily hesitated. Chose her words carefully. He's focused. Not anxious. Not reactive. Focused. Sandra nodded slowly. But still functional? Yes. Any aggression? No. None. Self-harm behavior? No. Sandra tapped notes into her tablet. Then we monitor. Could be transitional fixation. Could pass. Emily nodded. 'Cause again. Logically. That made sense. But the word monitor felt wrong in her chest. Like watching a storm build instead of preparing for it. Late morning. Emily walked Max toward the outdoor yard. Rain had slowed to mist, turning the grass silver and soft under cloudy light. Max walked politely beside her. Loose leash. Calm posture. Tail neutral. But his ears kept turning backward. Toward the building. Toward the piano room. Even outside he was listening for it. Go on, Emily said softly, unclipping his leash inside the yard. Max stepped forward. Sniffed once. Twice. Then turned toward the building door. Saturday. Waiting. Emily crouched beside him. You don't even want yard time? Max blinked slowly. Then lowered his head slightly but didn't lie down. Didn't relax. Just waited. The mist settled into his fur. Tiny droplets clinging to the edges of his ears. Emily reached out, brushing them away. You're okay, she whispered. Max's tail moved once, but his body stayed tense. After 5 minutes, she clipped the leash back on. They walked inside. Straight to the piano room. Like magnets. By afternoon, staff had started making gentle jokes. Max booked piano lessons yet? Maybe he used to be a concert dog. He just appreciates good acoustics. Emily smiled when expected, but she stopped laughing along. Because every time she stepped into that room, she felt it again. That subtle heaviness. That metallic edge in the air. Barely there, but present. She sat beside Max that afternoon, watching dust drift through gray daylight. You're not stuck, she whispered. You're guarding. Max shifted slightly closer. Pressed into her side. Warm. Solid. Grounding. She rested her hand on his neck. Felt the tightness in his muscles. The controlled breathing. The waiting. Jordan stepped into the doorway quietly. Vet coming tomorrow for routine checks. Emily nodded. Maybe mention the behavior, he added. I will. He hesitated. You really think it's something else? Emily stared at the piano. At the bench. At the shadows underneath. I think, she said slowly. I think he thinks something matters here. Jordan nodded once. Fair enough. Closing time came with heavier rain. The shelter lights dimmed one hallway at a time. Dogs settled. Blankets rustled. Night routine. Emily knelt beside Max one last time before moving him to his kennel. All right, guardian, she whispered gently. Bedtime. Max stood slowly. Followed her without resistance. But halfway down the hallway, he stopped. Looked back. Long. Still. Emily followed his gaze. The community room sat dark now. Piano barely visible in shadow. Waiting. She swallowed. Tomorrow, she whispered. Max watched the doorway another moment. Then walked beside her again. That night the rain turned heavier. Wind pushed branches against the building. Inside, the shelter settled into quiet sleep sounds. But security camera footage would later show. At 2:13 a.m., Max stood in his kennel, ears forward, body rigid, facing the hallway, listening, waiting. And miles away in the storm, thunder rolled softly across the sky, like something shifting closer. Something unseen, something not finished yet. Morning would come. Staff would call it habit, stress response, transitional behavior, and maybe part of that was true. But deep in his bones, Max knew something they didn't, and he would keep waiting, keep listening, keep returning to the piano, until someone finally understood. The storm cleared overnight. Morning arrived washed clean, the sky pale blue, the air sharp and cold enough to sting the lungs on the first breath outside. Inside the shelter, sunlight poured through the windows, brighter than it had been in days. Dust motes glowed like tiny floating sparks. Everything looked normal, almost peaceful. But the moment Emily stepped into the hallway, she felt it again. That quiet pull toward the community room. That subtle tension sitting just beneath the surface of the building. She signed in, set down her bag, grabbed a clipboard. Routine motions. Comforting motions. But her feet were already moving toward the older wing before her brain fully caught up. The community room door was open, and Max was already there. Closer than usual this time. Not beside the piano, directly in front of the bench. Standing. Still. Alert. "Hey buddy," Emily said softly, stepping inside. Max's ears flicked back toward her voice. His tail gave one slow movement. But he didn't step away. Didn't sit. Didn't relax. He stayed planted like part of the floor itself. Emily walked slowly toward him. Careful. Measured. The air smelled like old wood again, dust. And that faint metallic edge she still couldn't explain. She crouched beside him. Rough night. Max let out a low breath. Not quite a sigh. Not quite a whine. Just tension leaving for a second, then returning. Behind her, Jordan stepped into the room carrying a toolbox. "Maintenance wants me to tighten the bench leg," he said quietly. "Been wobbling forever." Emily turned. "Now." "Figured while it's empty." She nodded slowly, but something in her chest tightened. Jordan stepped forward. Max moved instantly. Not aggressive. Not loud. Just stepped sideways, placing his body between Jordan and the bench. Still. Solid. Ears forward. Jordan froze mid-step. "Oh." Emily stood slowly. "Max, hey." Max didn't growl. Didn't bark. He just stood there. Unmovable. Like a door that had closed. Jordan lowered the toolbox slightly. "Buddy. I just need to fix it." Max's tail stayed still. His body trembled slightly, not fear. Not anger. Intensity. Emily stepped closer. "Max, it's okay." She reached gently for his collar. He allowed it. But when she tried to guide him back, he planted his paws. Firm. Grounded. Refusing. The leash tightened slightly. He leaned forward, not pulling, just anchoring himself in place. Emily swallowed. Okay. She loosened the tension immediately. Max relaxed half an inch, then refocused on the bench. Jordan looked at Emily. "That's not normal." "I know," she said quietly. They stood there for a long moment. Sunlight shifted across the piano keys. The heater clicked somewhere down the hall. Dust drifted. Max didn't move. Didn't blink. Like he was guarding something invisible. Jordan set the toolbox down slowly. "I'll come back later." Max's ears flicked. But he didn't step away. By mid-morning, the behavior repeated. Cleaning staff tried to vacuum the room. Max stepped between them and the piano. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just present. Unmovable. Emily stayed beside him most of the morning. Visitors passed by the doorway, whispering. Curious. "He's so calm. He looks like he's working." Emily couldn't argue with that. Because he did look like he was working. Like this was a job. A responsibility. At noon, Sandra stepped in. Hands on hips. Calm. Observant. Show me. Emily nodded toward Max. Sandra watched quietly for a full minute. Max didn't acknowledge her presence. His entire world was the piano bench. Sandra stepped closer. Max shifted slightly, positioning himself between her and the bench again. Not threatening, just certain. Sandra exhaled slowly. All right. She crouched a few feet away. Max, she said gently. His ear twitched. Nothing else. Sandra looked at Emily. Has he eaten? Only if I bring food here. Sandra nodded. Water. Same. Sandra sat back slightly, thinking, watching. Then she said quietly, Okay. We stopped trying to move the bench. Emily blinked. Really? For now. If he's this committed, there's a reason in his brain. Even if we don't know it yet. Emily felt something loosen in her chest. Relief. Validation. Sandra stood. But we monitor. And vet check stays scheduled. Emily nodded. Of course. Late afternoon light turned golden. Long shadows stretched across the room. Max finally sat, but still directly in front of the bench, still blocking access. Emily sat beside him, not touching him, just sharing space. You're tired, she whispered. Max blinked slowly. His breathing finally deepened slightly, but every few minutes, his ears would flick, listening, filtering, waiting. Emily followed his gaze again toward the darkness beneath the bench. Her pulse quickened. She leaned slightly forward. The metallic scent felt stronger today. Not overwhelming, just more noticeable. Like pennies. Like old keys. Like something that shouldn't be there. She swallowed. Okay, she whispered. We're getting closer, aren't we? Max's tail moved once. Slow. Certain. Closing time again. The shelter quieted. Lights dimmed hallway by hallway. Emily clipped Max's leash. Come on, guardian. He stood. Followed her willingly. But paused at the doorway. Looked back. Long. Still. Like memorizing every shadow. Every sound. Every scent. Emily touched his shoulder gently. We'll come back in the morning. Max exhaled slowly. Then walked beside her. That night security cameras showed him sleeping. But not fully. Every hour he would lift his head. Listen. Then rest again. Like a soldier standing quiet watch. Morning would come. And he would return to the piano. Because whatever lived in his instincts was getting louder. Stronger. Closer to being understood. And Max wasn't leaving. Not until someone finally saw what he saw. Not until someone finally heard what he heard. Not until whatever waited beneath that piano was no longer waiting. Morning came in slow gray layers. Clouds pressed low over the city, turning the shelter windows into soft, dim mirrors. The air outside carried that cold, metallic smell that came after rain, sharp, clean, unfinished. Inside, the building felt quieter than usual. Not empty, just expectant. Emily walked the hallway with 2 cups of coffee, her footsteps soft against the polished floor. Somewhere a kennel door clicked shut. A dog sighed in its sleep. Routine sounds. Grounding sounds. But her chest still carried that low, steady tension. She reached the community room doorway. Max was already there. Of course he was. But today, something was different. He wasn't sitting. He was standing again. Directly in front of the piano bench. Head lowered slightly. Ears forward. Body tight like a wire pulled too thin. Hey, Emily whispered. Max's tail moved once. But he didn't relax. Jordan stepped up behind her. He's been like that since opening. Emily nodded slowly. Did he eat? Only if I set the bowl next to him. She stepped into the room. The air felt heavier today. That metallic scent was stronger. Not strong enough to be obvious, but strong enough to sit in the back of her throat. Max shifted slightly when she came closer, pressing gently against her leg. Grounding. Sharing the moment. She rested a hand on his shoulder. His muscles trembled faintly. You're trying really hard, she whispered. Max let out a soft breathy whine. Not loud. Not panicked. Just urgent. Emily crouched slowly, looked at the bench again, then the shadows underneath, and for the first time, she saw it clearly. A small corner of dark fabric, barely visible, tucked tight against the wall behind the back piano leg. Her breath caught. Jordan. He stepped closer. Yeah, there's something under there. He crouched beside her, squinting into the shadow. I see it. Max's body tightened instantly. Not aggressive, just alert, focused. Jordan whispered, bag? Maybe. Emily swallowed. Maybe. Max shifted closer to her, pressing into her side. Like he needed to be part of this moment. Like he needed to see. Jordan stood slowly. I'm getting Sandra. Emily nodded. She stayed there with Max, heart beating harder now, listening to the building hum around them. The heater kicked on. Air moved. Dust shifted. Max didn't blink. Minutes later, Sandra entered with quiet, careful steps. Show me. Emily pointed. Sandra crouched low, angling her head to see beneath the bench. Silence stretched. Then, that's a backpack. Emily's pulse jumped. Max let out a soft, strained sound. Sandra stood slowly, calm, focused. Okay. Nobody touch anything yet. Jordan nodded immediately. Emily swallowed. You think? Sandra held up a hand. We don't assume. We call it in. Her voice stayed calm, professional. But Emily saw the shift in her eyes. Concern. Real concern. Sandra stepped into the hallway, already reaching for her phone. Max shifted closer to the bench but stayed seated this time. Like he had done his part. Like he was waiting for the next step. Emily knelt beside him. You found it, she whispered. Max leaned into her shoulder, breathing still tight, still alert. Sirens didn't come screaming. They came quietly. One vehicle, then another. Low voices, calm movements. Police, then a city safety unit. They blocked off the hallway, spoke softly with Sandra, then approached the room slowly. One officer knelt carefully, using a small inspection mirror first. Another documented photos. Emily stood in the doorway with Max's leash loose in her hand. Max watched everything, ears tracking every movement, every voice, every sound of equipment shifting. Finally, the safety tech reached under slowly, carefully, and slid the backpack out. Old, dusty, zipper partially open. He placed it gently on the floor, unzipped it slowly. Emily held her breath. Inside, old electronics, loose wiring, batteries, not active, not connected, just abandoned, but not something that belonged under a piano. The tech exhaled slowly. Looks old, possibly training materials, or hobby electronics. We'll still process it. Sandra nodded. Thank you. The officer turned. Good catch calling it in. Sandra glanced back at Max. Wasn't us. The officer followed her gaze. Max stood quietly beside Emily, still watching, still alert. The officer gave a small nod. Good dog. Max's tail moved once. Slow. Certain. An hour later the room cleared. Tape removed. Officers gone. The backpack taken for processing. The air felt lighter, cleaner, like something heavy had been lifted. Max stepped forward slowly, approached the bench, sniffed once, twice. Then, he sat, but not in guard position. Just sat, relaxed. Emily knelt beside him. You knew, she whispered. Max leaned gently into her side. For the first time since this started, his muscles felt soft, loose, safe. Emily closed her eyes for a second. Relief moved through her chest. Warm, heavy, healing. Outside the clouds began to thin. Light pressed through the windows again. Dust motes drifted lazily through the room. Normal. Finally normal. Max lowered his head to his paws, still facing the piano, but not guarding anymore. Just resting. Emily stroked behind his ears slowly. You did good, she whispered. Max exhaled. Long, deep, peaceful. And in that quiet piano room, for the first time since this began, the waiting was over. But Emily knew something else too. Some instinct deep in her chest whispered, this wasn't random. Max hadn't just found something dangerous. He had felt something wrong. Something out of place. Something that didn't belong in a room full of quiet music and second chances. And he had stayed, waited, protected, until someone finally listened. That evening, when Emily walked him back toward his kennel, he didn't look back at the piano. Not once. Just walked beside her. Calm, steady, like a job finally finished. And as the shelter lights dimmed one hallway at a time, Max curled into his blanket, rested his head, and slept. Deeply. For the first time since the day he arrived, the morning felt different. Not brighter. Not louder. Just lighter. Like the building itself had finally exhaled. Sunlight slipped through the shelter windows in soft, golden strips. The air smelled like fresh mop water and warm laundry. Clean, simple, familiar. Emily paused just inside the front hallway listening. Kennels rustled. Tags jingled. A dog barked once then stopped. Normal sounds. Good sounds. She walked toward kennel 14. Max lifted his head when he saw her. His tail tapped the blanket twice. Soft. Easy. Not tense. Not waiting. Just greeting. Hey you, she whispered, kneeling beside the gate. Max stood slowly and stretched. Long front legs reaching forward, back arching, tail lifting slightly. Loose. Comfortable. Emily smiled. Yeah, you slept. She opened the kennel door. Max stepped out calmly and pressed his shoulder lightly into her hip. Grounding. But not urgent anymore. Just connection. She clipped the leash on loosely. Walk. Max blinked. Then stepped forward beside her. No pulling. No hesitation. Just steady presence. They passed the hallway leading to the community room. Max's ears flicked toward it for a moment, then settled. He kept walking. Emily felt warmth spread through her chest. He's done guarding, she murmured. Jordan, passing with a laundry cart, nodded. Feels like it. They stepped outside into cool morning air. The sky was open blue. Birds moved between bare winter branches. Max sniffed the air slowly, deeply, taking everything in. Processing. Resetting. Emily crouched beside him in the yard. You did something important, she whispered. Max turned his head slightly toward her voice. Soft eyes. Calm breath. Tail resting loose against the grass. For the first time, he looked like a dog who believed he was safe. Late morning brought visitors. Families. Couples. A retired teacher looking for a walking companion. Max walked through introductions calmly. Polite interest. Gentle sniff. Then stepping back. No anxiety. No searching for exits. Emily watched carefully, because part of her still expected him to suddenly lock onto something again. But he didn't. He stayed present. Here. Now. Around noon, a quiet woman stepped into the lobby. Mid-30s. Dark sweater. Nervous hands gripping the strap of her bag. Her eyes moved slowly across the room, like she was searching for something she wasn't sure she'd find. Emily stepped forward gently. Hi. How can I help you today? The woman hesitated. I saw your post. About the dog who found something under the piano. Emily nodded slowly. Yes. The woman swallowed. My dad used to volunteer here. Emily felt her chest tighten slightly. He passed last year, the woman continued quietly. He fixed instruments, tuned pianos, stuff like that. Emily's mind flickered to the old upright, to the dust, to the backpack hidden where only someone crawling behind the piano might reach. My name's Claire, the woman said softly. I just wanted to see the place again. Emily nodded. Of course. She hesitated, then said gently, There's someone I think you should meet. Max sat beside Emily near the front desk when Claire walked in. He lifted his head slowly, ears forward, not tense, just aware. Claire stopped a few feet away. Her breath caught slightly. Oh, She crouched slowly. Max stood, took one careful step forward, sniffed her hand, then paused. His ears shifted forward again. Not guarding, not warning, recognizing something. Claire's eyes filled with tears instantly. He looks like the dogs my dad used to bring home from work. Max stepped closer, pressed his nose gently into her palm, then leaned. Just slightly. Claire let out a shaky breath. "Hi," she whispered. Emily watched quietly. Something warm moved through the room. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just right. Claire sat cross-legged on the floor. Max settled beside her. Close, comfortable, present. "He used to say dogs know when something's wrong," Claire said softly. "Before we do." Emily nodded. "I think that's true." Claire swallowed. He passed suddenly. Heart stuff. He was here the week before. Fixing that piano, actually. Emily's breath caught. Claire looked down at Max. "Maybe your dog remembers him." Max rested his chin gently on Claire's knee. Still. Warm. Grounded. Claire closed her eyes briefly, one tear slipping down her cheek. "Hi, sweet boy," she whispered. Over the next hour, Claire stayed. She didn't ask many questions. She just sat. Let Max sit beside her. Let herself breathe in the quiet shelter sounds. Eventually she stood. "I wasn't planning on adopting today," she said. Emily nodded. Claire looked down at Max. Max looked back. Soft eyes. Loose posture. Calm. "I think I might be ready now," Claire whispered. Emily felt tears press behind her eyes. "Let's talk," she said softly. The paperwork process felt slower. More careful. More meaningful. Claire asked thoughtful questions. About Max's behavior. About his past. About his habits. Emily told her everything. Including the piano. Including the discovery. Claire listened quietly. Then said, "He waited until someone listened, didn't he?" Emily nodded. "Yes." Claire smiled softly. "My dad would have liked him." Late afternoon sunlight filled the adoption room. Warm. Golden. Peaceful. Claire clipped a new leash onto Max's collar. "Hands steady now. Breathing steady. Ready," she whispered. Max stood. Stepped beside her. No hesitation. Emily walked them to the exit. Opened the door. Cold air brushed inside. Claire paused. Turned to Emily. "Thank you." Emily shook her head. "He found you." Claire smiled. Then stepped outside. Max followed. Sunlight touching his fur. Wind lifting slightly at his ears. He paused once on the sidewalk. Looked back at the building. Not searching. Not guarding. Just acknowledging. Then turned forward again. Walking beside Claire. Steady. Certain. Home. In sight. Emily stood in the doorway for a long moment. Listening to the shelter sounds behind her. Feeling the quiet settle. Jordan stepped beside her. "Good ending," he said softly. Emily nodded. "Yeah," she whispered. "Rescue goes both ways." And somewhere down the hallway, the old piano sat quietly in its corner. No tension. No waiting. Just wood. Just keys. Just silence. Peaceful. Finally, the shelter felt quieter after Max left. Not empty. Just different. Like when a familiar song stops playing and the room needs time to adjust to silence. Morning sunlight stretched across the lobby floor in long pale rectangles. The air smelled like fresh paper, dog treats, and faint citrus from the cleaning spray Sandra liked. Emily stood at the front desk, organizing adoption folders. Routine. Comforting. But every few minutes, her eyes drifted toward the hallway that led to the community room. Toward the piano. Not with worry. Not anymore. Just memory. Jordan set a box of donated blankets on the counter. "You're doing it again." Emily blinked. "Doing what?" Piano stare. She smiled faintly. "Habit." Jordan leaned against the counter. "Or processing." Emily nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe that." The shelter doors opened. Cold air brushed inside. A volunteer stepped in carrying coffee. Dogs barked in greeting. Life kept moving. But underneath it all, Emily felt something settling. Something warm. Something complete. Later that morning, she walked down the older hallway. Not because she had to, just because she wanted to. The community room door stood open. Sunlight filled the space easily now. Dust still floated through the beams, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. Just normal dust. Normal quiet. The piano sat where it always had. Scratches along the side. Slight tilt in the bench. Emily stepped inside slowly. Her footsteps echoed softly across the floor. She walked to the bench. Knelt. Looked underneath. Nothing there now. Just shadow. Just wood. Just floor. She exhaled slowly. "You did your job," she whispered. Even though Max wasn't there to hear it. For a moment, she could almost picture him sitting beside her. Still. Watchful. Patient. She rested her hand on the bench. The wood felt cool. Solid. Ordinary. And that felt like a gift. Over the next week, shelter life returned to full rhythm. Intake days. Adoption days. Vet check rotations. Laundry mountains. Paperwork stacks. Normal chaos. But something had changed. Staff spoke differently about dog behavior now. More listening. Less assumption. Sandra even added a new training note to volunteer orientation. Unusual focused behavior should always be explored, not dismissed. Emily read that line twice the first time she saw it, then smiled quietly. Thursday afternoon brought an email. Subject line: Update from Claire. Emily opened it immediately. Attached were 3 photos. Max lying on a living room rug, sunlight across his back. Max sitting beside a small upright piano in Claire's home, relaxed, not guarding. Max asleep with his head resting against Claire's foot. Emily exhaled slowly. The message read, "He follows me everywhere, but not in a worried way. Just close. He sits by the piano when I play sometimes. Then falls asleep. I think he just needed someone to listen. Thank you for helping us find each other." Emily blinked back tears. Then forwarded the email to staff. Within minutes, replies filled the thread. Heart emojis. "Good boy, Max. Frame that second photo." Sandra wrote simply, "This is why we do this work." Saturday morning, Emily arrived early. The building was still half asleep. Lights dim. Kennels quiet. She walked to the community room again. Not out of worry. Out of respect. The piano sat silent in the soft blue morning light. She sat on the bench. Carefully. The slight wobble still there. She pressed one key. A soft, slightly out of tune note filled the room. It lingered. Faded. Peaceful. She pressed another. Then another. Not playing music. Just letting the sound exist. For a moment she imagined Max hearing it. Ears flicking. Head tilting. Then settling. Knowing everything was okay now. She sat there a long time. Just breathing. Just listening to the building wake up. Over the next month, stories about Max became part of shelter culture. New volunteers heard about the dog who waited. But not as legend. As lesson. Dogs communicate constantly. Through stillness. Through repetition. Through presence. Through patience. You just have to notice. One afternoon a new intake arrived. A young lab mix. Terrified of the grooming room. Would freeze in the doorway. Refused to move. Old approach might have been gentle pressure. Encouragement. Treat coaxing. Instead, Emily sat beside the dog. Waited. Listened. Eventually maintenance found a loose vent cover inside the room. Rattling whenever air moved through it. Sound humans barely noticed. Sound the dog couldn't ignore. The room got fixed. The dog walked in calmly after. Jordan just nodded at Emily. "Max training," he said. She smiled. "Yeah." Healing didn't come like fireworks. It came quietly. In small changes. In deeper listening. In softer assumptions. In patience. In understanding that sometimes, the bravest thing a dog can do is sit still and refuse to leave. One evening, As sunset turned the shelter windows gold, Emily stood in the community room doorway, watching dust float through warm light. The piano sat silent, peaceful, whole. She rested her hand lightly on the door frame. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if she meant Max or the moment or the lesson itself, but it felt right to say. And in the quiet that followed, the building didn't feel heavy. It felt held, safe, understood. Somewhere across town, Max lay curled beside Claire's couch, breathing slow, dreaming, not guarding anything anymore, just resting, just living, just belonging. And at the shelter, the piano room stayed quiet, not because nothing happened there, but because everything that needed to happen already had. Spring arrived quietly, not all at once, just small signs at first. Softer mornings, longer light in the evenings, the smell of damp earth instead of winter frost. At the shelter, sunlight stretched deeper into the hallways now, warming the floors, softening the sharp edges of fluorescent light. Emily stood outside the front doors one early morning, coffee warming her hands, watching pale pink clouds drift slowly across the sky. Birds moved through the trees near the parking lot. Calm, unrushed. She breathed in slowly, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt steady. Inside, the shelter hummed with familiar rhythm. Leashes clipped, paperwork shuffled, dogs barked greetings instead of alarm. Life continuing, healing continuing. Sandra stepped beside her. "Claire coming by today?" Emily smiled. "Yeah. Email said she has something for the community room." Emily's chest warmed slightly. "That's nice." Sandra nodded. "You should be here when she arrives." "I will." Late morning sunlight filled the lobby when the front doors opened. Claire stepped inside. And beside her, Max. His coat looked fuller now, healthier, brighter. His posture loose, confident, present. He saw Emily instantly. His tail moved slow, steady, familiar. Emily knelt. "Hey you," she whispered. Max walked forward calmly, pressed his head gently against her shoulder. Warm, solid, home in a different way. Emily closed her eyes for a second, breathing in the faint smell of clean shampoo, sunlight, and that warm dog scent that always meant comfort. "You look good," she whispered. Max exhaled softly, resting there for a moment, then stepped back, sitting politely beside Claire. Still grounded, still calm. Claire smiled. "He insisted on coming in." Emily stood. "I'm glad he did." They walked together toward the community room. Max's ears flicked once when they entered. Not alert, just aware. He glanced at the piano, then looked away. Satisfied. Claire carried a small wooden plaque. Simple, smooth, hand-carved lettering. She handed it to Emily. It read, "Some listen with ears. The best listen with heart." Emily swallowed slowly. "That's perfect," she whispered. Claire nodded. "My dad used to say that." They mounted it on the wall beside the piano. Max watched calmly from the doorway, tail resting against the floor. Peaceful, present, not guarding, just part of the moment. They stayed for a while. Claire sat at the piano bench, pressed a few gentle keys. Soft notes filled the room. Not perfect, not polished, just real. Max walked over slowly, sat beside her. After a minute, he lowered his head onto her foot and fell asleep. Emily felt tears press into her eyes. Not sad tears, full tears, complete tears, healing tears. Sandra leaned quietly against the doorway beside her. "Good ending," she whispered. Emily nodded. "Yeah." That afternoon, Claire and Max left again. But not in a goodbye way. In a see you later way. In a part of this family way. Max paused at the exit, looked back once. Not searching, not waiting, just acknowledging. Then followed Claire into warm spring sunlight. Weeks turned into months. The plaque stayed beside the piano. Visitors asked about it. Volunteers shared the story. Not dramatic, Not exaggerated, just honest. A dog who waited. A team who learned to listen. A moment that changed how people saw instinct, trust, patience. Summer arrived. Windows stayed open longer. The shelter smelled like cut grass and warm pavement. One afternoon, Emily sat in the community room during break. Sunlight spilled across the piano keys. Dust drifted lazily. She pressed a single note. Let it ring. Let it fade. Peaceful. She smiled softly, because the room no longer held tension. It held memory, and meaning, and quiet gratitude. Across town, Max lived an ordinary, beautiful life. Morning walks, afternoon naps, evening piano music when Claire practiced. Sometimes he slept through it. Sometimes he sat beside her. Never guarding, never waiting, just sharing space, sharing peace, sharing life. One evening, Claire texted Emily a photo. Max stretched across a sunlit rug, one paw resting lightly against the piano pedal. Caption: he still listens, but now he rests too. Emily stared at the photo for a long time, then set her phone down. Exhaled slowly, warm, full, certain. Some bonds don't form in loud moments. They form in quiet waiting, in patient presence, in choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. Max had done that, for something unseen, for people who didn't yet understand. And because of that, a team learned to listen deeper. A woman found healing after loss. And one shelter room learned how powerful stillness could be. Late one evening after closing, Emily walked past the community room one last time before heading home. The lights were off. Only streetlight glow filtering through the windows. The piano sat quiet in shadow. Peaceful. Complete. She paused in the doorway, rested her hand lightly against the frame. "Good night," she whispered. Not to the piano, not to the room, but to the story, to the lesson, to the bond that had quietly changed all of them. Outside, summer air wrapped warm around the building. Crickets started their evening chorus. Cars passed softly in the distance. Life moving forward, as it always does. But sometimes, if you slow down enough, if you listen carefully enough, you'll notice the quiet heroes. The ones who don't bark loudly, don't demand attention, don't ask for praise. They just sit, they wait, they listen. And when the moment comes, they help the world make sense again. And somewhere, in a warm home filled with soft piano music, Max slept peacefully beside someone who listened back. Unbreakable, simple, true, forever.